and ended up talking to my boss and just said I had to go see the optometrist. And he's like, well, what's wrong? I said, I just can't see myself going back to work, mate. We had the cops knock up one day and they said, look, there's more than likely going to be an armed robbery at this bank soon. And then I was 18, 19 and thought, shit, this is a bit surreal, this is a bit real. Just had a random phone call on my phone and it was Charlie Bazzina ringing me from Homicide, so fairly shitting myself just from the start that one of the legends of Homicide.
Well, I know Charlie well, and I know him well, but I looked up to him in my career. Welcome to another episode of I Catch Killers. Today we're talking to a recently retired Victorian police officer. In his 27 years as a Victorian cop, he worked in a wide range of fields. This included time as a uniformed cop, a detective in the armed hold-up squad, homicide, drug squad, sexual offences and child abuse squads. So we've got a lot to talk about. The sense I've gotten from our numerous conversations leading up to this podcast is today's guest is the type of cop I respected. A cop that was focused on serving the community and locking up the bad guys when needed. Today we're going to have a good chat about all things policing and some interesting cases. Also want to discuss how investigations differ depending on the crime that is being investigated, which should be pretty interesting. We'll also discuss our guest's career post-police, which includes working on the television series Hunted as the lead investigator and, strangely, becoming the mayor of a town he used to police. Graeme Simpfendorfer, welcome to I Catch Killers.
Thanks, Gary. It's great to be here and great to be back in Sydney.
Yeah, well, I always enjoy sitting down and having a chat with serving or ex-police officers. It's almost like we can speak another language, isn't it?
That's right. I think we get each other and understand those idiosyncrasies and particularly post-policing, what that life's like.
Yeah. Now, how long ago did you leave the police?
Yeah, probably just over 12 months now.
Okay, so pretty recent.
Yeah, still feels really new, still getting used to it. Wake up sometimes and see the news and think, no, that's actually not my job anymore to go and deal with that.
It is a strange thing, and I know a lot of police struggle with it and or have difficulty accepting it, that when you've left the police, because when you're in the police, you're fully committed. It's almost your identity, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%. That was exactly it for me, that loss of identity. I was probably a bit lucky, a bit of COVID times through then that things were locked down. Yeah. So I was able to just sort of lock my doors and deal with myself and what I needed to do to move forward post-policing. So I was a bit lucky in that regard. So not expected to go out to the pub and be yourself, because you're just searching for, well, what is it now? Well, I really didn't have a plan. I knew that enough was enough for me. Yeah, I had to look within myself and for my own mental well-being go, that's time to call it.
Okay.
And I did. I didn't really have a plan. So I was a bit lost there for a while, but it just takes time for me.
In policing, the thing is with policing that every day had a purpose. If you're a committed police officer and you felt like you were doing good for society, regardless of everything else about your life, each day you got up and felt like you were contributing to society, and that's sort of taken away from you. Did you feel a bit of that?
Yeah, I certainly did. Exactly that. You've hit the nail on the head there. Just that constant getting up, doing with what the investigations you had to deal with. But then if a new one came in, then you just got that new, bound of energy to deal with that job and deal with that risk for the community as quickly as you could. So you had that purpose, and then when it was just, it wasn't a decision I hung on to for long. I think it sort of just dawned on me, I need to have a break.
Right.
So I took some long service leave and I spoke to some close mates and had to actually just go, I need a long break.
Yep.
And ended up talking to my boss and just said I had to go see the optometrist. And he's like, well, what's wrong? I said, I just can't see myself going back to work, mate.
Yeah.
Just can't see it. So that made me realise I had my sense of humour back, but also realised maybe it's time on the career, because I'd never thought I'd do anything else. I thought I'd be one of those 40-plus year veterans and couldn't see myself
basically die in the job.
Yeah, pretty much die there. And we'll go through it soon, but going up to the rural part of Victoria in the north, there's not many before me that had that job. There's only probably on one hand since it started policing there 60, 70 years ago.
Was it a case that the bucket was just full? Do you think? And I hear people often describe it, and the cup keeps filling up with everything that you're seeing in policing and the pressure, and something just tips you over the edge. Did you have the feeling that you just couldn't do it anymore?
Yeah, I think I was starting to take some of those risk-taking behaviours.
Yeah.
I started to notice within myself and a few people close to me, like, what's going on? Are you okay? And then you sort of take check and go, actually, I'm probably pushing the envelope a little bit too close to the edge here with things and taking those risks. It was almost like daring the world to bite you back. And I had to take a break from that and just go, what is going on here? What actually is happening here? And reflecting on a long career and just some of that. But a trigger was mainly some of those SIDS deaths. That had been enough for me, particularly in a country community where you sometimes know the people involved and you know the kids. That just become a bit too much.
Yeah, well, we're going to talk about your career as a major crime detective, but I also want to talk about country policing because that's a whole different range of pressures and things that can impact on you as a police officer in a smaller country town, not the big city.
Yeah, you can't
major
hide.
Crime.
You'll walk down the street and everyone want to talk to you and find out what's going on, and everyone has their finger on the pulse. So, yeah.
Where do you think you got the fact that you could realise? Because I've seen a lot of people that have their burnouts, and it's usually pretty dramatic because they're not aware that it's happening to them. Where do you think you got your awareness that your bucket was full?
Yeah, your mates telling you to pull your head in. For me, a couple of close mates, what's going on, have a beer and really going that step further. Like we know are you okay? Or check on your mates, but really sitting you down and, mate, you're not yourself. You've lost your sense of humour. You're just working a million hours. You're going to burn yourself out.
That's a big thing, isn't it, when the sense of humour goes out the door and everything is dramatic. I know that feeling, and throughout my career where the pressure was on and you sort of lose that sense of humour. Yeah,
and making things bigger than what they needed to be. So going off, probably not going off, but, getting frustrated or really focused on something that really at the end of the day didn't matter so much.
Yeah.
But it was something to get angry at. And that's what the guy's like, really, boss? You're getting the shits at that? And you're like, oh, okay. And it might have been as simple as, guys, reverse the car into the car park. We've had too many bingles in the back car park. Can you reverse the car in rather than drive them in? And that's not a big deal.
That became the big issue.
And I might lose my shit over it. And they're like, really, boss, that's your thing? And that's when the time to go, what's happening here? And really start to go, it's all just becoming a bit too much, and had a break, had a time off. And it's sort of double-edged there, the country policing, because you're always involved. And whilst you might go on leave, people still know where you are.
You're not really walking away from it.
No. So look, in hindsight, wonderful thing. My advocacy now to a lot of those guys is when you go on your leave, you've got to switch off. You've got to turn your phone off. Don't be accessible. In hindsight, it's a wonderful thing. But
makes a lot of sense. During my career, I had 12 months off, and I went and lived over in Western Australia. I still had to manage a couple of investigations when I was off, but for all intents and purposes, I had a break, and I sort of threw myself into other bits and pieces and did some building and other things completely away from policing.
Yep.
That recharged me. I don't think my career would have been as long as it was if I didn't take that 12 months off. Yeah. And it gave me a different perspective, and also taught me that I could survive outside the policing.
Yeah.
And given the way that my career ended so dramatically, I think if I didn't have that experience, the ramifications would have been more dramatic to me.
Yeah, for sure. And I speak to a lot of mates that are still in the job around, what's your plan? What do you want to do? And do you have one? And they're just tied to the job because they know no different. And that's fair enough. But my leap was into the darkness. I had no idea what I was going to do.
Yeah.
But as I said, lost sense of humour, stopped going to the gym. That was a big one. That physical daily routine of actually getting all that adrenaline out and doing your PT in the morning, that had dropped away as well. So everything started to drop away, and you just got to go, I need to actually look after myself here, and sorry guys, but I need to take a break.
Yeah, well, it's good that you did that. I think policing would be better if we were allowed to step in and step out more and make it easy, because it's basically you're either a police officer or you're not. I would really like to see a system within all the jurisdictions where you could put 10 years in the police and go, look, I want to have a break. But then you could come back to policing, do a upskilling course, and which would only take a month or a couple of weeks, and then take your position back. I think we'd retain a lot more police, because it seems to be all or nothing.
Yeah, exactly right. All or nothing. And the fear of if I leave and take some time off and take that mental health break, you might lose your spot.
Yes.
And generally you've worked so hard for that. As I said, we've got your identity on that position. But if you know that you're going to come back to the job you want, or you've got that confidence that you can get yourself back there, or maybe somewhere else, I think it'll re-energise everyone. And I think all state police forces are struggling to get people to even apply these days.
Well, I see that across the country, and I wonder whether, it's time that they bring in things like that where you can have a break and then step back into it. Because I can assure you, if you've worked in the police for a long time, then you say leave and you go in the building industry, you realise how hard life can be outside the police, and the policing is not that bad.
That's right. Yeah,
that's the benefits of doing something like that. In New South Wales, just of recent times, and I think it's called Pulse. I've only read it in a media article, so I've got no inside knowledge of it. But they're talking about different ways of dealing with police, the stress. One of the things was rotating people out of, say I was working in Homicide Squad, rotating me out for a 3-month period, and then you've got your position coming back. I like that idea. Again, it was something they brought in rotation on the back of the Royal Commission in New South Wales Police. And it was basically, okay, you're in Homicide. And then I was the longest serving sergeant there, and I got rotated out of Homicide with basically told I could never come back to Homicide. And that absolutely mortified me.
That's
and
right.
I eventually did get back to Homicide. But if you gave people the opportunity just to have a little break, I think it would be another good thing.
And a little bit of ownership of that as well.
Yep.
The choice is there, but you don't have to. But once that choice is removed for you, and again, I guess it just chips away at your identity and your, I guess, connection to the job.
Yeah. You mentioned fitness and it's or training, and that's when life was becoming too difficult in the policing side of things, and that's one of the things that dropped away. I think that's something else that could be encouraged, and I think I'm hoping I'm reading it right. What they're doing in New South Wales is giving access to more, looking after healthy lifestyles, that type of thing. I think that's a benefit.
Yeah, and everyone I speak to that I check in on that may be struggling, and unfortunately we had a mate from up our way did take his life a few months back.
Yeah.
And you just don't see it coming. You check in and you think that everything's going all right, but one always seems to sneak up on everyone, and we're seeing it across Australia. It's far too often. But the guys and girls I speak to, I go, you've got to find your thing. What is it that fills your bucket?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that empties your bucket out. For me, it was going to CrossFit.
Yep.
And CrossFit's CrossFit. I just enjoy turning up, do an hour of smash, a workout out, get it out.
Yeah.
Don't have to think about it. Other people, it's mountain biking or swimming or hiking or going for a run or boxing like yourself. So find your thing.
Find that release. And I always thought that was a good way, and it should be encouraged in policing throughout my career. Where certainly it didn't lend itself so much in general duties because you're first responders. But in major crime, I always said anyone that I was supervising, train if you want to at lunchtime. And the benefits were tenfold coming back.
For sure, you get it back. Either, that loyalty as well to the boss that they've given me some time, because you can see it in your staff, can't you? You can see they're starting to struggle, or a few of their behaviours are starting to turn. So off you go to the gym.
A bit of give and take, and that's when you're really cracking the whip because you need the big effort from them. It balances out.
Yeah,
Graeme, why did you join the cops? What made you join the cops?
Yeah, I joined. I got a family history of services. So my old man was in state government and he was a fireman.
Yeah.
I'm one of 3 boys. My oldest brother joined the Queensland Cops.
Yep.
And a cousin of mine, who's pretty much a brother, was in the New South Cops. He did 20 plus years in the New South Cops. So I got out of school, bummed around school, didn't really set the world on fire in school, and the teachers would probably adhere to that comment as well. They'd probably laugh if they knew my career. And I just wanted to be a cop, do good, the good old cops and robbers, solve crimes, make a difference, as much as that might sound a bit too much, but to make a difference and have a crack at all. But I was a bit too young. I just got out of school. I was pretty young going through school, so I finished year 12 and was still pretty junior and pretty green. And the old man knew the inspector in Wagga, where I grew up. Yep. And he just said, "Look, you're a bit too young, mate. Go get a job in a bank." Yeah, and get used to speaking to people and speak to all sorts of people. The young, the old, the poor, the desolate, the rich, everyone. And that was great advice. So I toddled off and was lucky enough to get a job in Westpac in Wagga, and I did a couple of years there. And that's when things, it's really started. The urge just kept coming. It just wouldn't go away. Got to join the cops. Want to join the cops. It'd be great. And
if my research is correct in preparing for the podcast, something happened when you're at the working in the bank.
Yeah, good research there, Gary. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, Look, it was towards that time where I was getting ready to hopefully apply and put the application in, and was toing and froing. So, we had the cops knock up one day, and they said, look, there's more than likely going to be an armed robbery at this bank soon. And then I was 18, 19 and thought, shit, this is a bit surreal. This is a bit real. But, the managers and the staff there dealt with it. It all went down. So it was close to closing. The bad guys come running in. I don't remember too much other than I was working away, and all of a sudden there's a couple of guys in the bank, and you could see them with their firearms, and they're holding up one of your work colleagues at the teller, and I'm standing right there, like literally from you to me away, and could see that she was quite distraught to it all. And I wanted to give her a bit of a look, like, it's going to be okay. Let's just let them get what they want, and they can bugger off, because we would expect the cops to.
So the cops had given you a tip that it might be robbed. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, I think it was either us or another bank that day.
And were the police nearby, or? Yeah,
that's when it all went down. So pretty much they got their loot out the back door, and you could just hear it go down, and it was. It was pretty violent. It was. I think a few dents in cars and different things, and that's how I went. I want to be on the other side of that teller. I want to be doing that. Yeah. Submitted my application, and the rest, I guess, is a little bit of history from there.
And it started from there. It's crazy when you think of the armed hold-ups, the way they used to go down. And I remember as a junior detective, and there was a bank that was going to be robbed, and it was just our office dealt with it. We didn't have the tactical teams out there. It was just, okay, well, and I remember I was in the bank pretending to be a teller or whatever, and a customer in the bank, and had a couple of other police out there with guns waiting for the robber to come through, and he got arrested. But you imagine trying to run those operational orders past a supervisor these days.
No, that's right. No, wouldn't make it past.
What's your plan? Well, we're going to put one of us in the bank, and a couple of us are going to sit outside with our guns, and when he runs in, we're going to arrest him.
Yeah, actually, just remind me, there was one similar up in the bush that we did have to that, and we thought this particular place was going to be a target. Weren't sure, because we're actually on the vehicle. We weren't actually on the target, and the vehicle just kept doing a bit of a recce of this one place, and we thought the only thing open is this sort of bottle store. They must be doing a job there. And somehow we convinced the bosses to put a couple of us inside, that if it did look like it was going to go down, we could lock the front door, we could get the staff out the back, and they'd be safe, and our SOG guys would do the rest. But we convinced them, and they let us do it, which was still a little bit bemused, but it worked.
Society was different, wasn't it? It was a little bit, we weren't so risk averse, and sometimes it'd play off. I remember being in service stations that were going to be robbed with I think it was a red cap bandit. He was knocking off service stations all around Sydney. And so they put police in all the service stations, just hiding behind the counter, waiting for him to come in. Where were you first stationed?
I left the police academy and first went out to Malvern, in the inner suburbs of Melbourne.
Now, you grew up in Wagga, did you?
Yeah.
So what was that like as an experience going to inner city?
Geez, it was different, because I'd moved to Melbourne. I'd never been there. I didn't want to join New South or Queensland, because my brother was in Queensland and my cousin was in New South. I wanted to sort of forge my own path.
You want Simpfendorfers all around the country.
We wanted to cover the eastern states, I ended up going down to Melbourne and loved it. But it was a real shock to come out of the academy and then doing traffic duty in the centre of Melbourne, and hook turns and trams, and it was I wasn't in Kansas anymore.
I don't think people appreciate how scary doing your first major intersection traffic duty is when the lights have gone out or there's been an accident. I did it on the F3, my first one, and it was one of the most traumatising times in my policing career, trying to work out how to do the traffic signals on a major highway.
It was a real learning curve, but look, I had a good bunch of mates around me to teach me the Melbourne ways, and left the academy, and I think a group of us got a rental house together, and so I think there's another lady come and joined us. She was a nurse at one of the hospitals, so it was party central for a couple of years.
Really opens the world up, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
You're seeing a side of life and living a life that you never expected.
Good times, but couldn't do it forever, and Did
it change you as a person? What was sort of the changes you went through from working in the bank to then being a cop in the city?
Look, one of those gradual things, I guess. I remember asking some mates at the time that I'd come back home for Christmas holidays or whatever, and they go, "Geez, you've changed, mate." And you're like, "Well, what is it?" I go, "Just the way you stand, the way you're talking, the way you're, I guess, scanning the room, and the way you're looking at just everything, your whole demeanour's changed. I hadn't really noticed it because it was gradual.
Yeah.
But those sorts of things have changed, and just how you viewed the world. I was a kid, and trying to go to domestic violence incidents even back, mid-90s, and trying to referee some parents of what would I know about giving advice to someone having trouble with their kids or having domestic issues.
Whenever I see young police get into trouble, and it's hard with social media now, if they do something wrong, it's normally put out on TikTok or it's they're going to be embarrassed, they're going to be in trouble, and all that. It's a tough job, policing, isn't it?
Oh yeah, front line especially. Our job sort of turning up a bit afterwards to do the crime scenes and solve the crimes are completely different. The front line, so dynamic, under pressure, got to think on the spot, whether it's family violence, traffic, random car stops, whatever. It's really tough. And
when you think about it, you learnt with talking people down from potentially violent situations, all that. You do that now, and you're going to have phones on you. Everything you say is going to be recorded. Like I imagine that the times that I got involved in incidents and the language is flowing free, and it was bip. But that was the way to communicate with that person. And it worked because you've got to talk a language that they understand. Yep. Imagine doing that now and you'd be crucified. What? Because you swore at the person? He's a person that lives on the street. That's how he communicates. I communicated with him that way. Yep. But, it's a difficult game.
And just as you say, that context of everyone's got a phone, everyone's recording, and the only bit that either goes on the news or goes to internal investigations is the rough bit. Yeah. But if it's taken in a full context, might be a different picture. So I always get asked, what do you think of that? And I'm like, well, I haven't seen the whole thing, so how could I possibly have a judgment?
I think that's a good attitude to take, because I quite often get asked those questions too. The snippet comes on, well, what happened in the lead up to that when when the police officer reacted that way? Yep. What was done beforehand or what occurred after? Yeah. And
Yeah, for sure. But it's a tough gig, as you say. The first thing people will do, they won't go and help the cops, or they won't go and help sort out the problem. Straight on the phone, I'll do this one, and it's uploaded before you even got back to the station.
Well, I think like travelling on public transport when I was a police officer, and I did a lot of travelling to and from work on public transport. And the amount of times I had to step in on a train to do something. Now I would imagine, and I could pretty well say what I wanted. I had the support of the people in the carriage. Now it would be a completely different ballgame, because you know it's going to be filmed, and what you said to get control of that person mightn't be acceptable. So little things like that. Did you find that you made the right choice with policing? Did it feel like it was the right thing for you?
Yeah, definitely for me. It didn't take long for me to settle in and go, this is for me, because I was a bit lost at school, didn't know what I wanted to do. Yeah. Had no idea. Both brothers had gone off to uni, and uni wasn't for me. Yep. A bit of a rascal at school, so didn't really know. And then just policing just kept itching away, and kept seeing my brother and my cousin doing their thing. And I went, that I think that could be me, and only took the academy and just a couple of months afterwards to go, this is it, and really got really enjoyed it. So the study and the focus on learning and just soaking everything in from those senior officers that you respected, and some pretty tough men and some pretty intelligent women that were working their way through situations, because they didn't have the physical brawn, but geez, they could talk some guys down that you just go, thank God you're here, because this was going to end up in fisticuffs if you
It was a skill set, wasn't it? The police that knew how to talk to people and negotiate through difficult situations and command respect, not through threatening violence, just through talking it through. And did you have people that you were lucky to work with? Because I think a lot of people's careers in the police are predetermined by the first people they're exposed to in policing. And if you get a good person, it sort of sets you on the right path for the rest of your career.
Yeah, I think I was pretty lucky to go. You chose a couple of places you want to go. I just wanted to go where it was busy. So I was picking the northern suburbs of Melbourne, Broadmeadows, Reservoir, tough sort of places, but I didn't get there, unfortunately. I was put into the eastern suburbs, a bit more affluent. Yep. Probably a blessing in disguise, because you had a little bit more time to learn your craft. You weren't overwhelmed with starting the shift with 15 jobs to attend to. You might have had a couple. So the senior members and the sergeants took their time to show you the right way to do things, not just the quick way because you had to go to another job. But look, there's some that you'd look at and go, that's probably not the way I want to go. Yeah. But this is middle of the 90s, and and things were a bit different back then, I guess. But it's certainly some good ones. I went, yeah, that's who I want to model myself on.
That's because and I'm sure you get it as well. People ask for advice for young people wanting to join the police, and I always say find a good mentor and learn from that mentor. Yeah, and you've got to tiptoe through. You're going to be working with some, policing. Just because you join the police doesn't make you a necessarily good person or an effective police officer. But if you find the right person, it can you can pick up so much.
Yep, for sure. And the bigger stations were hard because you'd swap your shifts all the time, but you try and get yourself on those night shifts with a good crew. Yeah. But that's what I really enjoyed about once I finally got into crime and some of the squads, that the culture, not just one or two people, the whole culture of the squad was similar to what I wanted to feed off and where I wanted to learn. And that's when things really accelerated for my career and learning.
So again, in the squad, how long did you serve in uniform before you went into plainclothes?
I'd say about 9 years. Yeah, probably a bit over the average. Okay. I think the average was about 7 or so.
Yeah, so that's a long time in uniform.
Yeah. I did a fair bit of time in GDs and wasn't sure which way I was going to go. Initially, wasn't going down the detective line. I was going to have a crack at the SOG or the TRG in New South. Yep. I was playing rugby in Melbourne at that time as well, and that was good fun. Working policing and playing rugby was great. So I wanted to test myself in that SOG space, but I had my first daughter back then. She's now almost 21, and time's flown. But once she came along, I sort of realised SOG probably wasn't for me. I probably want a bit more of the family life than
a little bit more stability.
Yeah, and shifted focus, and then just really it found me more than anything else. I don't think I sorted out. Yeah. It found me, and I found I had a bit of a knack for working through some problems, or how am I going to work through this to get that person before the court or catch them and get that identification evidence to support the charge. And it came reasonably naturally.
How did you went from GDs and then to a local detective's office? Was it?
Yeah. So I went on just as a comment to, again, eastern suburbs in a suburb called Oakley. Yep. Again, it's had a history there with some organised crime in Oakley and Southern European type settlements. So a bit tough back in the day, and real good mix of commercial crime, a lot of freeways flowing through it, a lot of big CBDs as well. So we got a real mix of crime there, and sort of bounce between Oakley and a suburb called Glen Waverley where the academy was. Yeah. And really there was such varied crime there to learn your craft on.
That's good if you get a variety, isn't it? Yeah. Because it shows you all sides. Yeah. How did you find the paperwork, which people see detectives, the exciting, some might say glamorous side of, turning up at the crime scene and that, but what you've got to understand as a detective is that you're sitting in there and you're doing a lot of paperwork, sitting in the office. How did you find that?
It probably took me a while to really get it from the sergeants and above point of view. Yeah. But probably back to what we were saying before is find a good mentor. Found some people that were really nailing it and been around a lot longer than me. And one particular friend, a mate Phil, he was just great to, this showing him things. Yeah. This is where you need to change. That's not relevant.
Just stick to the statement.
Yeah. And again, with resume writing, the same thing of where to get to. So making sure I surrounded myself with those people that knew, and not, I saw a lot of members probably when I was a sergeant would sergeant shop. And they might even ask myself for an opinion and then go, I actually don't like that one because that means I've got to rewrite everything. I'll go and ask another sergeant and I'll get the answer I want. So making sure I trusted those that gave me the advice to be sound, and it eventually started to click. But paperwork-wise, I really enjoyed it.
What about court time, your court experiences? Because that's another thing that people have got to understand. If you do go down the path of a detective, you're going to be in the witness box in some precious situations, answering questions.
Court was where I learnt the most. Yep. And I think a lot of cops will say that, because when you're challenged by defence on your decisions, your note-taking, even potential bias that you may have had, where you're still keeping an open mind at this point of the investigation or not, and really drawing out all that stuff and being, I guess at some points accused of having a closed mind, and you wanted my client to be guilty of this from the start. Learnt so much in that process from the bail applications right through to county court trials. Yeah. and then eventually off to Supreme Court with some of the homicide investigations.
So it is a taxing part of policing, court work as a detective, but I never felt good going into court. Like, you always felt the pressure and the preparation that went in before you went into court, so you knew the brief and all that. And that's where I had some mentors, Jim Williams, Paul Jacob, and others, that when I first saw them, how much they prepared for court, I'm thinking, this is ridiculous. Like, really? Like, you're thinking, and I'm seeing the pressure they're putting themselves under, just checking everything, making sure they got the facts right and all the information. And then you see it play out in court and you realise that's what you've got to bring to the witness box.
Yeah, for sure. Oh, that's the grand final, isn't it? Yeah. So, similar. I had a person I looked up to a long time and still do. Was great to see him at my retirement. It was I think he's one of the bosses now at Homicide, Tim Day. Yeah, and Tim was just absolutely meticulous with paperwork and thoroughness. And I saw that in the early stages of my career, and I went, that's what I need to model myself on. And you're right, because by the time you get to court, how many cases or how long has been, you have to revisit your brief and your notes to be prepared. And it really showed, and defence respected that.
It is, and the way that you present in the witness box, especially in front of a jury, does say a bit that if you know your stuff, you've taken the time to make the effort to learn your brief of evidence, and you'll get cross-examined that, that happened at 8 o'clock. No. Well, what do you mean no? Well, it actually happened at 8:05. Yep. Yeah, that type of thing. Yeah. Because they're just trying to trip you up.
Exactly. And unfortunately, that's not around so much in the Victorian system these days. Everything moves off to the police system and wants to get resolved really quickly.
I see that in New South Wales, where people have had a long time in their policing career and haven't experienced court. Yeah. And for someone that went through the path I went through, I can't even comprehend that. I was in and out of the witness. I'd be sitting in the office and someone would say, you're in court. You'd have virtually court matters running the whole time.
Yeah, back to back. And putting that effort in for us when, if we really played our hand at some point for the bail applications to make sure they would stay on remand if we're talking serious offending, that might bring along things a bit quicker to a resolution at court down the track, as opposed to they're out on bail and, we're looking at 3, 4, 5 adjournments and trying to manage the victims then and that makes it really hard.
It's tough on the victims. And I don't mind this plea bargaining. I'm not so rigid in that, common sense has got to come into it. And if you can negotiate something that all parties are happy with and the victims don't feel like they've been disadvantaged.
That's right. First call to the victim, how do you feel about this? Yeah. And how does it look for you?
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Can you talk to us about an investigation, one of the first ones that you did as a detective, where you actually felt like a detective because you got a breakthrough?
Yeah. Probably one that comes to mind actually was when I was at Oakley and very green. So you're trying to prove to your colleagues, your bosses, everyone that you deserve a job. And
I'm laughing because as a young detective, it's very competitive, isn't it? Yeah. You've got the other young detectives that you're all competing against and you're trying to show you're the best detective. They were good times, but very competitive times.
And I walked into this office in Oakley and there's another trainee detective there with me, Mark Burnett, and he's actually a really close mate now. Yep. Not at the time. We're in competition against each other. We're sort of eyeballing each other and trying to figure each other out. What's his strengths? What's his weaknesses? And it wasn't long before we both realised we had a lot of similar characteristics and worked very similar. And we just got together and we just dug in and really worked hard. And we actually worked on this one job together where a guy was all the Met cards or the train ticket cards. They would try and they would load them with cash and different things. He was ripping off this news agent, was ripping them off for tens of thousands of dollars. And we thought, how are we going to catch this bloke? Like he's in and out so quick, and he was working for the train system. Yeah. And no one had ever suspect him. But we had a tip off about it, and we were able to get a camera in and put the camera right above where he was doing. And back a long time ago, trying to convince your boss at a regional detective's office, we need to monitor this camera. Yeah. The hours that would take.
I can imagine the response you would have got initially.
We I guess we pitched it that it would only go for a week or so. Yep. And the memories there was it was pretty soon that he came in and it was pretty obvious what he was doing. We had the cameras in the right spot, thankfully, because you're always like, shit, what if we've got this in the wrong spot? And get the wrong footage and we'd, get jumped on. But it worked out, and that's when I think we started to realise, actually, we're actually okay at this. We might have a career here.
It's funny, isn't it, when you crack your first case like that, something like that, and you go, oh, it actually worked.
Yeah,
and it sort of surprises you when you go, wow, I didn't think that would really happen. I was hoping it would happen.
No, and it was a really good culture at Oakley at that time. Some very senior sergeants that were there, and the crew was reasonably younger there, and a good mix.
You could have one good detective sergeant in a detective's office, and it can shape the whole office.
Yeah,
and I noticed that as a homicide detective, we were going around to all different LACs.
Yeah,
and you could virtually judge the quality of the work by one or two of the sergeants that were there. And if you had a go-getter that knew what they were doing, it would make the world difference. And that culture would pass through the whole office.
Yeah, you could almost tell within 5 minutes of rocking up to the crime scene if it's a mess or a shambles or they're on the ball.
Happening. Yeah. So how did you end up in the squads? What was the path there?
Yeah, so from that Oakley time, I then went on to temporary duties again at a regional armed robbery task force. So they had quite a lot of low-level armed robbery jobs, street armed robberies. And command at the time set up Task Force Hembona, and that was regionally set up at different areas around the state. We had one at Glen Waverley, and that was only armed robberies, but the lower-level stuff that the stick-up guys was sort of a bit lower for them.
So that might be someone pulls a knife and robs a wallet or comes into a corner store with a knife.
There were certain criteria it had to tick and trying to remember. It might have been, as soon as a shot was fired, straight to the crime guys, or a certain value stolen, etc., straight to them. So that was a bit of a stepping stone away from the divisional work to go up to that, because everything there was to county court, every armed robbery charge.
Yep.
So really honing that paperwork, but that crew there under that sergeant at the time, Tony Carr, who's now retired, that was next level stuff. That's where I really went, this is for me, and the squads are for me, and learnt so much out of that crew, and everyone in that was a small team, only 4 or 5 of us.
Yeah.
And the same guy I was working with at Oakley, Mark Burnett, we both ended up there together. So just competing
tight
again.
Little crew.
But long days, long hours, and being able to run with those services of surveillance, the tech guys, the undercovers and different things really opened your eyes up to what's available to it all. So I was pretty lucky to get some time there.
And it's a creative area to work in too, isn't it? Because you've got to think outside the square. And I think people often think of cops as concrete thinkers or black and white, but it's the creative ones that really bust some of these investigations wide open. Yeah, and that was that time. So that was where we were able to learn, and the sergeant didn't just give us the answers, this is what we're going to do. He would sit us down, what do you guys reckon? Yeah. And we'd come up with some scenarios and go, that's not going to work because of this. Or, no, that's too labour intensive. We're never going to get a listening device in because who's going to monitor it 24/7 for a month? There's only 4 of us and 2 are going on leave. So we need to come up with another option on how we're going to tackle these groups. So he would actually give us that licence to think outside the box and learn from it. And that really just opened up my world to where I wanted to go. And that's when I started to go, homicide is for me. Okay, and how did you find yourself to Homicide Squad? Yeah, so I had to do my time at the Hembona Task Force. I got my first full-time detective job at Glen Waverley. Yep. And that was another stepping stone to there, but just making sure that everything you did was as good as you possibly could. What sort of training did you do to get your qualification as a detective? How long did it take in Victoria? Like I know the New South Wales, and I've talked about that, but in Victoria? Yeah, we're going back a while now. I was course 198 of Detective Training School. Yep. And back then it was a consistent long course. Yeah. So I'm thinking, I think it was about 6 weeks. Yeah. But pretty intense. Now it's done in chunks, I believe. And even before my time of going through it, it was even more ruthless. If you failed an exam, gone. Never to have another chance. Yeah, we had that system that you'd get one shot at the interview. If you failed it, your papers were marked never to be interviewed again. And the course was the same if you failed the course. And when I went through, it was late 80s, early 90s, I think, the detectives course. And I think it was a 6-week course. It was a 6-week course and a 4-week course, but it was intense. Yeah. It was really if you wanted a career as a detective, you had to pass this. So it was go to the class each day and then just study the whole time. Study hard. Yeah, I think it was about 2003 for me. So around that
9-year, 10-year mark.
Yeah.
I've been in the job and it was intense, but I loved it. And that's what I mean. Like when I couldn't find my way out of school, once I finally found what I wanted to study, it wasn't a chore, it wasn't a labour.
Yeah.
But I had to work. It wasn't something that came natural to me.
And you come away with all this knowledge when they set the bar high. I always, if I was running a strike force, I'd try to get someone that's just finished the detectives course because they're all upskilled on all the latest legislation and know everything that we pretend we know. And no, we
spot on.
So you grab them and they're a wealth of knowledge, and you suck all the information like a sponge.
And it can change so quick, and they're the ones that are up to date, so contemporary.
Yeah.
And that's something I always prided myself on, trying to stay contemporary with what was changing in the law or what was changing in techniques.
Definitely.
So it was hard to keep up, but you're right, those that had just been through it, I'd lean on them and go, hey,
what's
this right?
This new stuff they're talking about?
Yeah, so that was good.
So homicide. So, you've got your designation, you're working as a detective, you've been on the strike force. Yeah,
and I'd done 2 years at Clem Waverley Detectives. The boss there at the time was ex-Homicide.
Yep.
And he'd been there, right throughout his career, I think. And I'd gone in, had in hand, and said, "Look, this is where I want to go, boss. How can you help me get there?" And it was sort of along the lines of, "Look, you haven't quite done your 2 years here yet, so do your bit, and then we'll see if we can swap you out with someone."
Yep.
And ironically enough, it was with this, I think now boss of Homicide, Tim Day.
Right.
And he was looking to come out to get promoted to a sergeant, and I was looking to go in. So we'd almost done a straight swap. And it was it was done a bit different back then. I just had a random phone call on my phone, and it was Charlie Bazina ringing me from Homicide, so fairly shitting myself just from the start that one of the legends of Homicide.
Well, I know Charlie well, and I know him well, but I looked up to him in my career as some of the legends you had down there as Homicide detectives in Victoria when you were going through a particularly busy period. But Charlie's just a great human being.
Oh, he was great, and he's rung at cold call me, and it was just interview on the spot. Over the phone. And I was like, shit.
That sounds like Charlie.
So, look, thankfully I'd been studying and prepared and getting myself up to date with some of the techniques of, surveillance and undercovers and homicide law. So, look, I must have done all right because I said, yep, all right, you can come on in. But I'd actually gone on to a different crew depending on geographically where you were in the state. So everyone could carpool. And I ended up on a crew. It was actually the boss of Homicide, Luch Rovis's crew, but there was someone else upgraded at the time. A few sergeants were upgraded and they had a couple of jobs running. So I think I rocked in on the Monday morning, but they were on days off. So my first day in the office was rock up and the crew was on a rostered day off, rightly so.
Yeah.
And I was just trying to find my way around and just, look, my memory of it was just being half intimidated, but half such a sense of achievement.
I'm glad you say that, Graeme, because people talk, you reflect on your career and different times. One of the highlights of my career, like as in the progression of your career, was getting to Homicide. I was just so rapt. That was something that from the time I joined the police, I thought I wouldn't mind that, but I wouldn't say it openly. Yeah. And you looked at, homicide detectives as mythical creatures. And then when you finally got to Homicide, I was just so proud and just so excited to get there.
Yeah, I'll echo the same. I was half proud, but I was pretty shitty myself as well. Like there was an open floor plan and I think there's about 9 crews.
And you talk about like with Charlie, I had like Dennis O'Toole, Paul Mager and people that I'd looked up to throughout my career, and there they were on the floor, Mike Hagan, and I'm working with these people. Yeah,
some legends from our way. And we'd had the underbelly, the gangland wars had been going on, and when I was at that Regional Armed Robbery Task Force, the advertising came out to put in for Task Force Piranha that were looking into the gangland murders. And one of our bosses at the time said, look, have a real good look at this, kids, because you'll burn yourself out. And task forces are task force. They're great, and this one will go on for quite a while. And his experience made us trust him to go, you know what, we'll just hold back and see what happens for a bit.
Yeah.
And look, the Piranha job was an incredible investigation by the whole team, but probably good for me at that time not to go in knee deep.
Yeah, and During the investigations like that, the type of pressure that was on for your guys down there, and we saw it, we were watching it from afar in New South Wales, and occasionally the jobs would cross over and you'd come up to New South Wales. But that makes the quality of it too. I think, it's forged by fire, forged by the pressure, and that's why I was so impressed with Victorian Homicide when I was in New South Wales Homicide, just the way that you guys went about it. Yeah,
it was great. And when I first went in there, I was on this crew, and it was a bit of a mixed crew.
Yep.
As in, sorry, I shouldn't say that, not a mixed crew. It was a crew that the senior sergeant was upgraded to the inspector. So the sergeant shared the upgrading, and they were unbelievable sergeants. Again, I didn't think there was anything over what I'd already seen, and we've done a whole nother level.
Yeah.
You think you know something, and you rock into Homicide and realise I know nothing. I need to sit down, shut up and learn. And I'm looking around the floor, and there's these senior sergeants in roll on leg, Jeff Maher, these absolute legends that I've seen operate, and here I am. So the on-call aspect was, people were still working so many hours as you guys would have. Leave would get accrued up, and 12 days owed, and there was sort of gaps in the different crews. So I had a bit of a plan to just, I guess, subcontract myself to these other crews that were missing someone for on call. So I'd get to see how Ron Iddles worked. I got to see how Charlie worked, or Luch Rovers and Jeff Maher, and got to all that experience.
Smorgasbord of experience.
Took it in. It was amazing, and picked up how I wanted to be. Even at that stage, I didn't think I'd ever be a detective sergeant. My plan was just to be a Detective Senior Constable Homicide for a long time.
And you see how those blokes hit the crime scene. And I saw it with Paul Jacob, Paul Mager, and that when I was learning my trade. And you just stand back and you're in awe.
Yeah.
It's chaos, and they just take control. They look, they see, and then things just start happening. And it's impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, for sure was. And that's where leaning on those guys and the sergeants below and the crew around you.
Yeah.
So it was a baptism of fire. Yeah, that's for sure. My second day was one I'll never forget.
Tell us about that. This is your first murder investigation with yourself strutting around calling yourself a homicide detective.
Look, I guess you can't make this shit up. It's just, it can take so long for someone who's on temps at Homicide just to type someone up for a murder.
Yeah.
And there've been people there for a lot longer than I was on temps.
Most people can go through their whole career in Homicide and not not have someone that they've chased down and locked up for a murder.
So day one, I'm just, no one's there. My crew's not there, and just sort of met the important people, the clerks that make it run.
The new kid at school trying to look.
Where's the coffee? Where's my locker?
Yeah.
What's going on? What's happening here? And all of a sudden, it sort of got to a bit later in the day, and what time do I leave? I won't leave until everyone else is leaving. And then can't remember who, but one of the sergeants like, your crew's on call tonight. Here's your car. Here's a phone. See you later. I'm like, I'd never done on call overnight. It had only ever been, just perhaps maybe in the regional areas you might do on call for a job, but this was you're on call for homicide. Take a car home.
On call homicide is serious business. That's one thing I don't miss about policing. I enjoyed it, but for the 20 years or more that I was in Homicide, and every 6 weeks on call, and you haven't got a life. You're just sitting there waiting for the phone to ring, and invariably it does, and then you're out at the murder scene. Yeah,
and of course that night, go to bed, getting ready. I don't know if I was just about sleeping in my suit, but I was ready, just thinking, this is great. I've finally got a car, I'm on call, and when's the first murder? It's really sad, isn't it? When's the first murder going to happen?
Yeah.
Which is really sick. But phone rang about 7 o'clock, and it was the boss, and I just thought he was checking in to make sure I hadn't damaged the car, or you're actually going to come in.
Just checking your response time.
Yeah. He goes, we've got a job. I was like, oh, shit, all right, get ready to go, and gave me a job, and it was out in the northern suburbs, and 2 housemates had an ongoing feud with each other and some mental health issues, and one had killed the other, and he'd rung O to say, I think he just said down the line, the O, I'd killed a man.
Yeah.
And uniform had turned up, and he'd killed his housemate. It was quite violent. And I remember even saying to the sergeant, this is not good. This is pretty ordinary, this scene.
Yeah.
And he was like, I haven't seen it like this for a while. So my first one was pretty bad.
It can be gruesome.
Nice. Yeah, but I got there first on scene because I wasn't too far from there. And of course, the local detectives see the homicide guy turn up and think,
straight to you.
well, he's got his shit together, and this is day 2 for me, and I think the squeaky voice has come out, and we'll just wait for the boss to get here. But look, it was just sink or swim. It was in. And by that afternoon, I was interviewing my first person for Homicide, and had typed up a murder charge that afternoon. And
the first one's surreal, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like you know people get killed, and here you are sitting down speaking to the person that's murdered another human being. Yeah,
and having the confidence of those, like the boss had confidence in me, just turned and said, this one's yours, because that crew was flat out.
Yeah.
So to have that belief to get it right, still nervous as all hell. Yeah. But even the crew helped you out, and that's what I mean about the whole culture there was something to soak up and take in. And I look back now and go, that was a different person. That was a young kid, way back then. And then when I was finally able to be a detective sergeant myself and try and, I guess, impress on others coming through in a similar way and give them that support, I was able to go full circle, something I'm very grateful for.
The thing about Homicide and the advice I'd give people at Homicide on a homicide investigation or lecturing was just think how you would do an assault. It's the same. Obviously the consequences are higher, the scrutiny is going to be higher, but the practice that you put in place, just make sure those practices are done properly, and that will get you through. Because I've seen in local area commands where Homicide aren't running the job, there's a reluctance for people to take that step because they get nervous. They think, well, should we charge this person? Should we arrest him now or her now? Or all these things. It's almost like I won't say fear because that's selling them short, but they just don't want to get it wrong. And you just got to explain that it's the same as any other brief you're doing. The consequences are higher, but just trust what you've learnt on the way there.
Very similar advice I was given. It's the same brief. You just, unfortunately, you're now attaching coronial reports and other statements to it in relation to the death of that person, as opposed to someone that's had a fractured skull or a broken jaw. But trying to have that attitude is difficult. Or that I guess that perception of what's coming, and not to be, I just found it as something let's take it head on and see what I can learn out of it.
Yeah.
But again, lucky to have some really good people around me at that time, and
They and you may not be able to comment on it, but I know speaking to Charlie that they all got rotated out at some stage, and I was mortified hearing the circumstances in what had occurred, and I think it's undervalued the type of experience that collective group had just to take them away from a homicide squad and what there's a lineage that needs to be passed on. You just can't cut off all that experience.
Yeah, I wasn't too close to that. I saw it happening. I wasn't at Homicide at that time, but I saw it happening, and it was seriously, it was like, are you kidding moment? Like, where's the succession management? The intricacies of a homicide investigation are that complex, as you well know.
Yeah.
That experience of knowing exactly how this may play out to a jury from the time you step foot on that crime scene is you can't just give that to someone who's only got experience in fraud or someone who's only got experience in sex crimes and vice versa.
They're all separate, 100%, and that's where, because I always talk homicide and I sound like a wanker because I'm going, oh, well, homicide know how to do this. But I defer to fraud squad experts, whether it's armed hold-up or sex crimes. They've all got their expertise, drugs, and I don't think you can just rotate people round and you lose that experience. Paul Mager was my supervisor for, I think, 10, 15 years. He was my supervisor, and he had about 25, 30 years in homicide. There was so much experience there. You can't just lose that experience. I was investigating homicides for 25 years, and I'd say I learnt something every day I came to work.
And that's the point, isn't it?
Yeah.
If these bosses were there and not being prepared to challenge themselves or test the thinking or stay contemporary, you could probably almost think the decision is probably a given. But to just rotate, I still don't know, to rotate for the sake of rotating them out.
Yeah.
I think part of it at the time, from my recollection, may have been it was an anti-corruption measure. It's like, seriously.
Yeah, they hide behind that a lot, this anti-corruption. I know with Homicide, when we got rotated out, or I was saying I got rotated out because I've been there the longest as a sergeant, and it was anti-corruption. But I suspect a lot of it was informal power basis, that certain people didn't like the I'm not talking about myself here, but people above me that had vast experience senior police felt threatened by them because they were recognised as the experts in that field.
Yeah.
Like that crew that you mentioned from Victorian Homicide, when they rotated them all out, they were all legends.
Oh, yeah. And, look, there's some amazing investigators still there now, no doubt.
Yeah.
But to come in with a broom so quickly and how it was done, I've only spoken to a couple of them, but, how it was done, it's pretty poor in my view, looking from the outside in.
Yeah.
And probably didn't help the culture at the time throughout all of crime.
Yeah.
And then it became a system of you'd put a name on a list to different squads.
Yeah.
And look, people there's some amazing fraud investigators, and I've seen the sex offence, child abuse investigations firsthand, and how they turn up and how intricate those cases can be.
The skills that they got.
Yeah, they know this is going to be an issue down the track.
Yeah.
If we don't do this now, this could be an issue down the track. Now, if you're a homicide investigator, you don't know.
You're not seeing that. You're looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
I think we also need to say, like we're talking, you've rotated all these people out, and you made the point that there's some good operators there now. I'm sure there is in any environment. Like there's no one's bigger than the actual squad or whatever.
Yeah.
But you got to give these people the chance to learn from the experience. And I always talk about the lineage that gets passed down, because that's what I felt like. It was like serving an apprenticeship. I'd start as a junior in the homicide office and gradually work your way up, and it was all the different experiences that you get. And I don't think that can be bypassed. No,
and my lived experience, I was at Homicide, and my next step was the Armed Offender Squad.
Yep.
Infamously got shut down in 2006.
Right.
So the Chief Commissioner and Deputy Commissioner of Crime at the time, Simon Overland, and Christo Nixon, shut down the Armed Offender Squad.
Yeah.
Pretty much pencils down, don't touch another thing, you're all out.
Yeah, I remember that, watching it from afar.
Yeah, and I had some mates there, and they knew that I was keen on homicide, and that was my only career. I'd sort of done my armed robbery time at the Mbona Task Force, and they were shut down. And because I was one of the last ones in at Homicide, the boss was like, I think you're going to end up on this pretty much overnight.
Because they had to fill the void.
Yeah, so I think I actually can't recall how many crews they had. There's a significant number of crews at the Armed Offender Squad to then just be a group of 5 of us overnight, and of course get a job.
Just inundated. And you said to me when we were chatting before the podcast, and I concurred with you, because I agree that was some of the best times I had in Homicide. When you're a junior officer in Homicide and you're learning, it was probably the highlight of my policing career. And you said, if I didn't have to chase promotion or whatever, I would have happily stayed there for the majority of your career.
Yeah, that was my plan. Yeah, just to stay. I was more than happy being the Detective Senior Constable at Homicide. Challenging yourself, and every day was different, as you said. Every case was different, and making such a difference representing the deceased and their family. I thrived and I loved it. I didn't get anywhere near as the time I wanted.
You wanted.
This other squad got shut down, and off you go, son. You're going over there. And I was like, I don't want to go there. Yeah, too bad.
And I think that type of stuff can cause more stress than what you see on the job. Yeah, when you put your heart and soul into finding a direction in a career, and then all of a sudden the flick of a pen has changed. And I understand. I'm not naive. There's competing interests, and resources have got to be spread around fairly. But I saw a lot of people in New South Wales Police that their career path didn't go down the path they wanted, and that caused them more stress than actually doing the job.
Yeah. I sort of got the tap from the boss at Homicide, and he was like, this is going to happen. Yep. So I need to try and find a positive out of it. And again, that was part of the learning I had, is how can this be a positive? Because it was a tough time to watch your colleagues get shut down. Yeah. And not understanding the whole ramifications of what. And it was a tough time for those of us that went there and were told we had to do a job. We had a certain expectation about being on call, and there was a fair bit of tension around the building, to say the least.
Oh, I could imagine. We went through the Royal Commission up up here in New South Wales Police Royal Commission, and I was in major crime at the time, and it was a horrible period at the time. And I've got no problems with corruption being stamped out, but there was a lot of collateral damage from what happened there, and I don't think we're fully recovered. And I can say that because I was in major crime before and after, and I think we lost a lot of experience and lost a lot of good people, and that's not defending the people that were taken out because they were corrupt. That had to be done. But there was some strange things said in New South Wales, and that like one particular plan that came up that they were going to put all detectives into uniform. And that from a person that was proud of being a detective, I found that offensive. I really did. And what happened to the crew down in Victoria? Yeah,
it was rough to just put the broom through everyone. And some of those people had been there a long time and were bloody good at what they did. And all of a sudden overnight, just thrown in the deep end because of your experience at this other one. Like, it was nowhere at that level they were operating at. And of course, a job happens overnight, and thankfully someone had rung us and given us a tip that that'll be this crew. Just look for this job because. Well, that's
I think we might take a break, Graeme, because I want to talk about that in part 2. And what is that the gym gang?
Yeah, that leads to that.
Okay, that would be interesting. I want to talk about your time as a country cop, and really dig deep and touch on the differences between the different squads, because you've worked in different areas and the different approach to investigation. So let's have a break, and then we come back and we'll jump into your days of armed hold up.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers.